Hi, everybody, and welcome to the next edition of the Mirus webinar series. We've been doing this monthly for 2 years now, so nearly 6,000 people have gone through these webinars over the last couple of years, so that's really exciting. We like to bring the most valuable, most interesting content to you every month. So please definitely put comments in the chat, because we use that information to decide what else we might do. Today, we're going to be talking about how technology and data is transforming the future of aged care. And it's a very important topic, I think, because a lot of things are driving it. I'll talk about that in a second. Firstly, acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to the land, the sea, and the community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Remember that if you are collecting CPD points, this does count. 1 hour, 1 point. So please make sure you log that. It's valuable training. Like I said, please ask questions in the chat. There is somebody monitoring the chat. If you have questions, they can answer it. If you have comments, we will try to get back to your questions and comments at the end of the session, but it's a pretty tight hour and we've got a lot to get through. But we do review every single comment and every single question. And if there's anything else you'd like to know more about, please make sure you put that in the chat or put that in our feedback form at the end. We're very committed to bringing you the most valuable information in this 1 hour snapshot that we give you every month. So as usual, survey findings, we ask you some questions, polled you on the way in, and we've got some results from that we'd like to share. I'd like to introduce you to the panel that we've got. We've got some providers on today to give us some real life points of view and experience on what's happening with their data and their strategy and their technology strategy in their own businesses. We've got a special guest who's going to give us some insights around digital and data decisions that you could be making for this year. Then we'll go back to the panel, and if time permits, we'll get back to some questions at the end. So we'll hear a bit more from Luke Benson from Blue Bike. He's our technology strategist and expert. He's going to provide some content for us today. Welcome, Luke. Thanks for being here. He will introduce himself in a minute when we've got some content for him to share. So the polling questions as they come in. Before we actually get to the polling questions, why is talking about technology and data right now important? From my point of view, 3 key things that I wanted you to think about from the get-go. One is obviously reform is driving change. So the reform agenda and all the new expectations that are coming along with it is making people, Care Minutes, for example, is making people question whether their technology platforms are doing the job they need to do. And as well as that, the second thing is there is new tech available all the time. Maybe it's not all keeping pace with the changes, which is a challenge. Maybe some people are looking for some magic solution from new technology, which may or may not be available. We'll come to that a little bit more later. But one thing is for sure, that changing your technology or trying to invest in your data can be expensive, but certainly can be disruptive. So when I say expensive, it is a big investment and a big decision. I know most of you listening today would have felt like they spent a lot of money on technology over the last 5 or 10 years, and you're still spending it. So how do you make good decisions about that? I think that's what some of the things that we're trying to tackle today, and I'm sure it affects all of you to a small or large extent. So the polling questions that we did on the way in, here's the first one. So my organization's digital strategy is definitely on track. Just a quick snapshot of sentiment about overall strategy. And what's interesting here is when we get strongly agree, under 50%. So less than half the industry feel confident that their strategy is on track. Now, we do get these large 38% not sures, and rather than just not sure, being sure what to answer, we find that this, when we dig deeper, this more often means not sure yet. So time will tell whether they're actually got the right strategy or whether it's on track or not. But definitely there's 13%, 14% in there who already know that it's not. So that's important. My organization's digital strategy is driven mostly by our own needs rather than by compliance and reporting requirements to the government. Now, you can see here that there's 23% and 24% if you include or not strongly disagree, 24% who strongly or disagree. That's a very large number. For the way that we phrase these questions, we don't often get large no's. So that's a really significant number. So a lot of people out there, a quarter of people very strongly disagreeing that that their own needs is driving it. It's more the government's requirements. Again, there's 35% who are not sure yet. So combining that, there's 41%. There's a lot less than half that are either disagreeing or not sure. And I think this is an important point because it's a little bit of a weakness in where a lot of the significant funding that is coming through the budgets and through the government is being aimed. It's being aimed at B2B, B2G improvements in technology rather than enabling individual providers to be more digitally enabled. But we'll come to that a little bit more. I think Luke will talk a little bit about that more in a bit as well. My organisation has the capacity, people and money and capability, as in knowledge, to create and deliver our digital strategy. So do you have what you need? Again, under 50%, 40, so significant, 47% agree or strongly agree. So that is good. But again, more than half the industry or half the respondents, I should say, are not sure or don't think so. So the capacity or the capability to do it is going to be a constraint. And that's where it comes back to what I just said, which is it would be a good opportunity for more of the money to be diverted to providers to be able to provide them with the space, the headspace and the capability and the capacity to improve their own digital journeys, not just conform with compliance requirements. The most important success drivers for delivering my organization's digital strategy are, so we've come up with 5 and quite often these are fairly evenly spread. So it is in the subtle differences because you can pick multiple responses. It's in the subtle differences that are interesting. So by far the largest one was capability within the organization to develop and deliver the strategy. So that is what people believe they need more of, more headspace, more resources, more investment to be able to actually determine what they need. And again, that's what this webinar is really about. It's where can you look first or where can you focus? Luke will talk to us a little bit more about that so you can get a head start or get the best bang for your buck. So this case, less about the data. We normally have a data section at the beginning, so we're going to skip that and we're going to jump straight into the panel. So thanks, Wendy, Frank, and Justin for joining us today. I just wanted to preface this by saying we didn't look for providers out there who necessarily have nailed it. We haven't invited technology, heads of technology or CIOs or anything. We're really looking for CEOs and heads of businesses to talk about the strategic focus on technology. How is it affecting their business? How is it affecting the business outcomes? So that's the focus we wanted to have today, to keep it practical and to keep it focused on outcomes and on the residents themselves and the benefiting the residents themselves rather than technology for technology's sake, which is a kind of a different conversation. There's lots of really clever, cool technology out there, but that's not what we wanted to talk about. So thanks, Wendy, Frank, and Justin. And the first question I wanted to pose to you now, and we'll get to the future later, the first question I wanted to pose to you now is, what's your technology journey been like over the last 18, 24 months? What have you been focused on? What's really brought you to this point right now? And let's start with you, Wendy.
I almost said that hoary old chestnut. I'm on mute. Just remembered. Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Look, our journey has been fast and furious, really, but it probably started a bit before that, in that we, at some point, I think maybe it was about 2013 or 14, I had done some work with a business strategist, and he also was a tech expert, so we sort of started partly from our own needs, but I would have to say in the beginning, driven by the oncoming compliance issues. So we started working with him to map our business, and he took us to a few big data places. I don't know if you've ever been to them, but one of them's, I think, with the Commonwealth Bank and a few others. But anyway, and that just really blew my mind. The amount of data and how it was being used to make decisions. So in all truth, we really kind of started looking at our systems through that lens, I would have to say, back then, not knowing whether we were stupid or not. But it's really kind of stood us in good stead as we've gone forward. And, you know, when you had the poll questions up, Andrew, I would have to say that probably our driving factor as we've moved forward is really our own needs. I'm not saying that we aren't driven by compliance like everybody is, but I guess what we've seen is I actually got really excited at one point because we were getting data that we could make decisions on. And in aged care, and I've been in aged care for a very long time, that kind of evidence-based decision-making has not been a feature. And I've always struggled with that a lot. So that's kind of where we started. And we've moved, you know, forward both to keep up with compliance, but also to get to the point where we didn't just have separate systems, but we had systems which at least talk to each other. And so it was as much about the framework as anything else, and the interrogation of data to see if we could, you know, get what we wanted out of it rather than what people were telling us that we should get out of it. So we're still on that journey, but we've come a fair way for a small group. And, you know, it's both exciting and draining and expensive. I just think that you bleed money when you really start to think about the digital journey forward, because not only do you have to invest a lot of capital, but, you know, you've got ongoing subscription payment, maintenance payments, goodness knows what. And I can't see that changing. So what you said earlier, I just resonate with that, you know, the focus on the big government systems, well, bully for them. And I'm not saying they don't have to have them because they're obviously wanting to make bigger decisions based on all the information that they're getting. But in the meantime, being funded appropriately to be able to invest in the way forward is a real issue.
Yeah, some really interesting points there. And I don't want to labor the point of expensive, because it really is an investment, and people are expensive too. So the alternative is not great. But I think the point there, though, is that it has to be focused on outcomes for the residents and value. It has to be creating value. I did get a chance to ask the government on a forum about why that so much of the money was being focused on compliance-based sort of B2G systems rather than the providers, and they were very upfront about it and said they're driving a very specific reform agenda. So they have to respond to these reforms, and so, you know, the investment is in systems to enable that reform being as lower impact on you guys as possible. So, I mean, I think that's justifiable. It's just a shame that $500 or $600 million is going to improving department systems. It would be great to see some of that money being available to providers to improve their own systems or their own digital journey. That's my view, but that's probably for another day. Thanks, Wendy. Frank, your thoughts on how you've got to where you are today?
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, so we are in the organization that I currently work for in the middle of the journey, but I'm sort of referring in my example to what I've currently done now, but what I've done previously in another aged care organization. So as it relates to our digital journey, I'm very strong of the view that the starting point is being very clear what your organizational strategy is. And within it, clearly defining what it is that you want to be famous for, as opposed to being that compliant-driven organization. And besides strategy as a big input, the second thing is we're working on a business capability model as part of a broader enterprise architecture approach. And the reason why we do a capability model is structures are inherently changing. I think everyone on the line will have continuously structural review, and processes are also more or less continuously changing. And I think Toyota is famous for saying you have to change the process at Toyota, otherwise you're not doing the job. So you can't build the IT strategy on process nor structure, but I do think that capabilities is the way that tends to be constant. That doesn't really change that much. And so we're doing business capability mapping, articulating what are all the functions that you would expect to see in place in an aged care organization. Now, once we do the strategy and the business capability map, we overlay it into a current state IT environment. And what is then becoming very clear through heat maps, where is the data? Where are the systems? Where do I make investments? And most importantly, where don't I make the investment, yet data is critical? And that heat map exercise is really a very important platform for me to then create a future state on where I want that to be, that then leads to a 5-year IT roadmap. And so by doing it that way, we are transforming digitally our business. I'm sure Luke will talk about AI a fair bit. And in my way, I'm building the platform so that I can get the organization ready for future things like AI through that enterprise architecture way. It worked for my previous business, and I'm planning that as we speak in my current business.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, Frank. And yeah, the more you're changing your strategy, and it's funny that Wendy also mentioned strategy, so I wonder if it's going to be a theme, but yeah, if you start doing different things, then you do need your systems to do just slightly different things, and it structures and processes. You know, a lot of processes exist outside of systems, but structures are the people and the roles and what they're doing, and so you know that does drive your systems and how you're using them. But it does come down to how the information is flowing and who's using the system to do what. Yeah, so that sounds like a good systematic approach. Thanks, Frank. Justin, what's brought you to this point?
I guess ours is slightly different. Our organisation, we merged, we started in 2020. So we were 3 separate organisations merged into one new entity. And the vision we had at that point was, okay, we're going to do one system across all our sites. That's where we're going to head. And that was without any real analysis of it, I suppose. At that point, it was just, well, that's the logical thing to do. As we've, over the last couple of years, as we've started to do a bit more deep dive, we've actually realised we don't need to do that. So rather than try and combine all of our, you know, to have one clinical system, et cetera, we've taken the view of, well, with the upheaval, I suppose, once we decide to change, we don't need to do that. So there's enough other technology out there that we can start to use to start to pull the best bits of each system. It doesn't disrupt the staff because they're used to using a particular system, and we're getting the information that we need. Now, that strategy continues to change, and we'll talk, each panelist has spoken about strategy, but that's exactly what it's at, is that it continues to change every time there's a change in legislation or with the new Aged Care Act, et cetera. We're then looking at, okay, who are we collecting this data for and what do we want to do with it? And it's very easy for us to fall into that trap. And we're probably about halfway there at the moment around, are we collecting data for the department, And if we are collecting, how are we using that data for us? So we're trying to navigate our way through that at the moment around that. We're collecting all these pieces of data for so many different shareholders, and it's about longer term, what are we going to do with that? And that's the challenge we've got at the moment. So we're probably the only strategy that we've settled on is to go at the moment. We're going to continue with our separate clinical systems and use things like AI, et cetera, to pull some of that data together. But that bigger picture strategy around, well, longer term, what's it look like in 2, 3, 5 years? That's continuing to evolve. And I think, over time, that 5-year prediction will come sort of 2 and 3 years. Technology will continue to speed up. So having a 5, 6, 7 year IT plan, I don't think will happen in the future because it will be things are moving too quickly.
Yeah, Justin, some really some great points there. And as one organisation that's on the AI journey with us, definitely starting to invest in that technology early. But you're not the only person I've spoken to recently about giving up on that idea of one system. Another big organisation having a similar problem, consolidation or acquisition or merging, and they've just got to a point where they've stabilised one platform across X number of sites and another platform across another group of sites. And then one of the themes that we'll talk a bit more about after Luke speaks is the importance of looking at the data sometimes rather than the technology, and that can change your decision process, because you're thinking less about one system to have one way and one technology. As long as you can solve all the problems that you need and move the information where you need to, you don't need to necessarily have that disruption. And it's not to say you won't change your systems, it just changes the decision process. You can make a different decision about when to do that and why to do that and what you're trying to get out of that, than just one system with one input and one reporting process, which has often been driving that decision up till now. Thanks, guys. Thanks for that preliminary information about what's brought you to now. Let's go to Luke now and get a download of his thoughts. He works across a number of organisations in aged care, looking at IT strategy in particular. And this is really a download of what he thinks is the most important things to distill out of that. But without further ado, I'll just hand over to him to introduce himself and tell us what we really need to know, Luke.
Thanks, Andrew. Excuse me. It's lovely to have everyone on the call today. And as Andrew said, I have the privilege of getting to work across the sector as a consultant at Blue Bike, which means a number of the organisations on the call today I will have spent some time with, and look forward to more of that in the future. The work we do and the work I get mostly involved in is developing digital roadmaps. Love to hear some of that conversation that was just happening about business capability models and long range, short range roadmaps. Also do a lot of work around tech strategy, data governance, and those aspects as well in my consulting life. But it's through that work of getting to work across the sector so broadly that I've got this unique opportunity, I guess, to share with you some insights that are common to many of you. So Andrew, I might move through to the first slide. What we've got here, and we want to try and walk you through this process with starting with the 30,000 foot view that says, what would a roadmap look like illustratively in the aged care sector right now? And it should look something like this from a change perspective. So over time, we see fewer legacy technology systems. They are replaced with, hopefully, 3 key pieces of technology: an integration capability to move data around, a modern set of integrated platforms, and a data layer, a data platform, which is where a lot of our innovation is going to come from in the future. So hopefully, kind of that ability to modernize systems and wrap those systems in data and integration gives us the sort of future-proof capability and the digital maturity that we're looking for in the sector. IT governance and cyber and data privacy both also increase their share of the landscape. This diagram also highlights, I guess, just in between the reforms at the bottom and the illustrative sector roadmap at the top, is that, as been mentioned today, we've got a number of initiatives coming out of the Department of Health and Aged Care, and they, I'll go to this in a bit more detail in the third topic, but certainly we are going to deal with more and more overhead, administrative overhead and compliance overhead for good reasons and for valuable reasons. And there's a lot of gain to be had in that grey layer. I've tried to summarize at the bottom what we've been through and what's ahead of us. But I would also characterize that something like care minutes, whilst we may have implemented it, we're probably still relying on manual processes in many organizations to compile this data. And so we're only in the crawl, walk, run. We're probably in the crawl mode with some of these implementing these reforms. And most of them will start there always. So 3 topics today I want to dive into. One, we're going to use care minutes as an example to talk about data aggregation. We're going to talk about AI because it's 2024 and you've paid your money to be here. And we're also going to spend some time diving into a bit more detail about the business to government APIs and why it matters. So Andrew, if you can move us to the first slide, and I'll draw everyone's attention to the next slide.
One thing, Luke.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
These slides will be available, so don't worry about screenshotting and panicking and writing things down. You'll get a copy of the slides.
You'll absolutely get these. Yeah. 3 care minutes, 3 unique changing linked data sources must be combined. We have one of the first times, especially in residential aged care, where we've needed to combine data from so many systems to achieve one outcome, which is measuring, are we going to hit our targets and setting ourselves up for reporting. This data sits across 3 different systems. Typically, our residents are generally in a client management system, our shifts are generally in a rostering system, and our workforce are generally in an HR system. And we need to suck this data together instead of trying to think about how to push the data across those systems, because there's at least 3 of them involved. And I would call out here 2 other players in the care minutes mix of the government and their footprint of data, as well as all the agency minutes that we need to also record that often many organisations can only get from invoices. So I've used some, I warned you that I was a dad joke enthusiast. So cliche in, cliche out. The technology capability that brings this data together, that data platform of your future, or you might have started investing in, is going to be the place where we clean data. It's the place where we can join up data, and those tools are vital to actually being able to automate pretty seamlessly. Excel has a role in all of our lives, and it's a fantastic hothouse for developing new ideas and working out how to report or how to count things. But as I've called out here, it needs to be treated very much as digital debt, not a digital asset. It's important, I think, here, because the reason I'm raising it is because, as I said, in crawl, walk, run mode of meeting reform requirements, there'll be a lot of Excel get introduced into business processes temporarily. The trick is to get rid of it as well, just as quickly. And Justin called out the synchronization of data across systems, or the getting data out of systems. What I haven't shown here is the option of getting rid of systems and rationalizing, but we genuinely believe, and aligned to what Andrew was saying, that the many, many multiples of value can be derived by getting data into a lake, getting data into a warehouse, getting data somewhere where it can be then utilized for a whole lot of secondary purposes. We generally would question why 2 systems needed to be connected to each other directly if we have a data capability in between. Bit of a care minutes, I guess, is a classic example of, it's a great use case for a data platform, but there are infinite use cases for that same investment. I'll keep going, Andrew, and let's spend a little bit of time talking about the hottest topic in tech. The decision here was to tell you all about the geeky stuff or look at something more interesting. I thought, let's just ask the robot what it thinks are the most important priorities for AI in aged care in Australia in 2024, and it had a decent shot at it. We got insights about predictive analytics for patient outcomes, and we'll forgive the robot for not knowing the difference between residential and in-home care and hospital settings, but also workforce utilisation opportunities and care plan quality, and these things all pop out as the obvious use cases for the technology that we know of today in AI, but there's a whole lot of technology coming soon. I think with this, area, it's an interesting space for all of us because we're at the juncture of brand new technology, the promise of incredible productivity gains across for all of us, from back office all the way through to helping, clients themselves and their experience. And we've got a glimpse into the future of that through ChatGPT. It's the first time something really disruptive AI-wise has entered our lives, but it's obviously been there in Siri and other places for a couple of years. But I think it's an opportunity for organizations to look at Gen AI, creating new text or new answering questions from data through a chat interface of actually just Q&A in Teams, with asking a Teams bot a question or asking ChatGPT a question. We're just seeing the nuts and bolts of that technology arrive now and be stable enough to then be built on. And so what you'll see is the next wave of AI capability, and the one that's probably most important is something referred to as RAG, R-A-G. It stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And right now that means we have the nuts and bolts of a tool like ChatGPT that knows how to talk to humans, but what we layer on top of it is our data. And so it can be given a question, interact with you as though it's almost human, and then go and do some data queries and come back to you with the answers. You'll hear more about that in the future, a lot more in the next 2 to 3 years, but that's how we'll bring our data to the AI layer. But you'll also be doing data science projects and other initiatives. Generally, rule of thumb, 20K in 20 days for a proof of concept that says, will we get value out of this type of investment? That's a good sizing to sort of set yourself up for clear success criteria of a proof of concept. There are great and exciting products emerging on the market. Really recommend staying across the opportunities as they emerge. And I think for this sector, there's just so much to gain because margins are so tight and we have to find productivity and turbocharge our staff. I'm going to go to the next slide, Andrew, and wrap things up by talking about not the BGs, B2G. The promise one day with business to government is that the data will come back to us, and also data that we don't have will come to us. So hopefully one day we're talking about B2G to B, and we are hopefully as providers benefiting back from the data we're providing back into our systems. A massive, almost once in a generation size investment into digital technology, as Andrew said, very much focused on 2 things: a provider management system that's a portal for people, and a set of APIs that will effectively, I'm probably settling on the phrase, make it better without making it worse. So a whole lot of Royal Commission recommendations need to be serviced, and the government is genuinely trying to come up with the right solution to say, here's how we make it better for you, and try not to make it any worse because the job's already hard enough. Those APIs are the secret to unlocking that. But it requires software providers to become conformant. And conformant's a really important word today. And as we wrap this bit of presentation up, you'll see here there's a whole lot of things we need to absorb as an organisation around software upgrades and business processes and dealing with the quality of our data. Because if we're going to plug directly into government systems, if our software is going to talk to the government's systems directly, then there's a lot more discipline needed. But the 1 to 2 year horizon looks like a lot less manual admin overhead and a lot more press a button, upload to government type scenarios, which is what we all want. A modest set of capabilities and APIs at the moment around registered nurses and quality indicators, but it's the framework for the future. And the Digital Transformation Sector Partners Group that Mirus and Blue Bike are part of are able to influence what APIs are most important for the sector and hopefully put things on the roadmap earlier rather than later. Something like an ANAC reclassification API that let us automatically move people through ANAC levels, or in support at home, there's going to be 11 package levels potentially. We're going to need automation to make that stuff easy. But this comes back to the topic of conformance. I want to clarify conformance. It doesn't get clarified very often. You hear it from the government, and I'll be quite quick on this. Think of it as there's a ticket to play to be a software provider to connect your software to these APIs. That's called the foundation level of conformance, and you have to be secure and protected and a whole lot of other things. And then there's more conformance per API. So registered nursing has some extra things to tick off. So you need your software providers to be conformant. And if they're not got a pathway to be conformant, we need to be talking about alternatives, because that's basically the only way we will get our data automatically into the government without humans having to do it. So very, very important. We're in a huge phase of change still, as you saw on the first slide. Lots more technology changes to come. And I think that relationship with your CMS vendor, if you're not already actively talking to them, be actively talking to them about the next 1 to 2 years of software development for them. On that note, I'll probably leave it there. That's a QR code you can scan. It takes you to the government's digital strategy, which is a really good read for the aged care sector. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. Thanks, Andrew, for your time.
Excellent.
Hand back to you.
Thanks, Luke. I just wanted to add on to the end there. So your comments about, taking it back to the comments about AI, Mirus is driving AI into providers. Like I said, Justin and Alina on that journey with us as an example, but it's very much something to start now and figure out how it's going to develop with you. Here's a couple of examples. This is 2 things that we've learned already about AI, and we've been working with providers on it for about 12 months. The first one is that just picking up what Luke was saying, data may be more valuable outside of the systems and the silos. So rather than now looking at each vendor being responsible for helping you move that data around, there are so many use cases developing where the data comes from too many places. It needs to come from too many places. It's better to start thinking about the data outside of those systems and in some sort of a lake or warehouse. And that's not the data that you need to put into your data warehouse for reporting. This is not a Power BI problem. This is all of your data. Pull all of your data out and have it in a way that you can manipulate it for lots of reasons, reporting and other standardization, but also for AI. AI models need to work on standardized data, and getting it out is an easier way to standardize it than leaving it where it is. Most of the AI that's being incorporated into specific systems is really to improve the productivity of that system rather than to enable you to do other things with it. So the second really key finding is that AI really is clever, and it is because it is clever and because of the way that it works and because of the RAG techniques that Luke was referring to and all of the new ways that the technology works. I mean, I saw our models working the other day, and one AI model was talking to the other AI model, which at one level is kind of scary, but at the other level is fascinating. One model's trying to do one thing, and then it's serving up the answer to another model who's trying to do something different, and then playing that back. So really, really sophisticated technology in one sense, dumb in other ways, but sophisticated in some senses, but is able to provide insight and solutions in a way that regular programming almost can't. We can't think of every possibility of how that programming needs to be to solve every problem. So this is really more open and gives you a more generates answers in a much more fluid or much less defined environment, which is what we need, because a lot of the data in aged care is a lot less defined and a lot less structured. So AI may be able to solve problems, persistent problems that we've never been able to solve before, and that's what is exciting about it for me. I'll give you some ideas of defining current use cases. This is pragmatic, practical. How can we solve problems in aged care today? So AN-ACC classification forecasting from clinical data, we estimate that somewhere between 200 and 250 plus $300 million is being spent by this industry just processing AN-ACC, just getting the money from the funding model into your bank accounts. So we can use AI, and we are developing AI models right now to automate that constant reclassification. We're even working with the digital CRC and hoping to get some pilot projects into the department to see how we can use this technology to streamline those processes and to make them more consistent. Resident monthly care statements. So this is coming. This is already a pilot program, but it requires multiple sources of information. This is not an easy thing to do, and probably capture or require input from several expensive resources to get this sort of stuff done. If that's ever going to be achievable, AI could play a really big role, as well as moving the data out of your systems could play a really big role in making that really efficient and much more valuable. Enhanced standard readiness. We're just about to change our standards. There's a lot of work that's going to have to be done. These models are we're already developing these models to look at compliance-based applications of clinical data and quality reporting, being able to streamline that process of understanding what your readiness is for the new standards is another application we're working on. The last one is this idea of a careverse. So at some point, if we can pull the data out of the clinical system, standardize it from various other medication management and other places, and then every organization has a standard data set which can then be replicated across all organizations, there is the possibility of creating an industry-wide data set that is secure and segregated and all of that sort of good stuff, but also uniform and de-identified and able to be scrutinized across all providers to create real insight, industry-wide insight across this industry-wide repository that we're calling the Careverse. So really exciting opportunities, not science fiction, not that far away, but definitely something to think about investing in sooner rather than later. So that's a little bit of an update from us. Back to the panel. Let's go back to the panel and hear from you guys. So the second question I wanted to come back to you guys on now is what's next? So what are you, there's a whole bunch of information. Some of that will resonate with you and some of it won't be as relevant for your organizations, but where are you looking at going next? And what do you think the implications are for your organizations? And then by extrapolation, the industry as well. So I'll go backwards this time. Justin, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. Look, one thing I mentioned earlier, our focus is really trying to work out what we can use AI for and the best way to do it. That's the, it's, as Andrew said earlier, we've been working on it for a little while now, and it's very complex, but the possibilities are really exciting. And I think that's the part we're taking out of it, is that particularly for organisations, we all know we have so many different software packages around, maintenance and, catering and all these different sorts of, there's so much data getting gathered in there. Sometimes there's so much data that we're either not using it well or we're using it for the wrong reason, as in compliance, et cetera, et cetera. We sort of see some of those, the AI helping us pull the most relevant data out. So, and I love Luke's comment about the data lake. That's exactly where our head's sort of at, is to go, if we can almost stick it in a pool and say, there's everything, how do we pull out the most relevant stuff? That's really where our focus is trying to make that leap, I suppose, from collecting the data, which our staff, when they're working every day, they're collecting all this data. And obviously we've got our, indicators and all those sort of things that we're submitting to the department, but how can we use that data better and how can we make sure it's relevant? And I think there's real possibilities with AI around that. And we're sort of putting a lot of our eggs into that basket, focusing on that. And it's moving so quick. I'm sure if we had this panel 18 months ago, AI was just so far out there, no one was even contemplating it. So, if we fast forward another 18 months, where are we going to be at? We have to continue to adapt, and that's sort of where we're at the moment.
Yeah, so true, Justin. Couldn't agree more. And I love that. And pull the data versus collecting the data. And I think that's really important, because then the systems become about the use. There's operators who need to do something, and so the system choice becomes about what's the best way to do that, not what's the best way to integrate it, what's the best way to to have a big box that does everything. So that's really, really interesting. Frank, you can go next. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, in our case, look, I talked about setting up the foundational IT roadmap based on the business capability model. I think the next step for us into the future will be, because to be fair, what we do now is about us. The next step is about our customers, our residents. So the next step will be use of assistive technology, care management system, but more done from a resident perspective, sensors, monitoring, smartphones, mobile apps, smart homes, robots, telehealth, virtual reality, wearable technology, all of that stuff. So that's what does that look like, that we truly empower our customers and residents. That's the next step. And then whilst we design that piece, it's the bit in the middle, which is the AI, and how do we then extract data from that technology that then informs better outcomes for our customers and residents. So that's the bit that we just need to work out. What's in it for our customers? And I think, yeah, how we do that, I have to admit, we haven't figured that one out. I have a view that a lot of organizations are promoting one thing. It's all about virtual reality, it's all about robots, it's all about this, that, the other. It is a mix. And then providing the insight back to the residents, because ultimately it's about them, it's not about us. That's the journey that we're on. That is the future. How we're going to do it, no clue yet.
Yeah, Frank, some really interesting points there, and also connecting back to one of Justin's points about the constraints in the data, but bringing them out of the systems gives you an opportunity to transform that data. There's a lot of work going on in transformation of data, so you can change the data once it's outside the system and do some more things with it. But the observational data, the monitoring devices and all of that sort of thing, I think one of the things that's been limiting those, the take up of those, is you're just creating more data silos. So they do a great job in what they do themselves. Then what do you do with that? And those who have sort of figured out how to get some integration have got more value out of those. But this idea of pulling the data out, that's the next frontier. We're already talking to people about that. Luke's one of them, about how to get these devices or how to get this technology at the coalface that is producing more data, but there's no point producing more data if it doesn't link it in with something. It's just another data set that you've got to manage. So yeah, we're really excited about how that observational based data or tech can create data and feed it into and be connected with all of the other data we've got to add more value. So yeah, really good point there too as well. Wendy.
Well, I won't take up a lot of time because my answers are probably pretty similar. In our strategic IT roadmap, and one thing I didn't mention before, I mean, it probably is self-obvious, but maybe not for smaller or standalone services and smaller organisations. But if you haven't got a strategic IT committee in your organisation or your home, then you really should have one, in my view, because I think that just that basic implementation has made a huge difference in us being able to continue to map our way forward and to try to predict the future. Which is, you know, and then we meet and on a regular basis and review that. So I think AI, absolutely, we've hung around long enough. We thought we might be going with a data warehouse at some point, and to some degree AI has kind of taken that over a little bit. But I see that is absolutely the future for us in being able to get that data together and make it far more useful. But we've also, and again, this probably applies to a smaller organisation or a standalone home or whatever, but we recently brought our housekeeping and services back in-house after having them contracted out for a few years. So we've invested in cleaning robots to assist our service in that area. It collects, the robots all have names now, and it collects some information for us too. So I think we're also foraying into additional services, and so the next point on our map really has to do with the clients and the residents. Yes, we need the AI to work on our systems to give us the ability to make sensible decisions and also to comply. But to be able to assist the residents is our priority, really. And so we're looking into AI in that respect as well. Bit of a, for instance, we started with the cleaning, and we're just looking at that and reviewing how that's going. But we'd be looking at some sort of concierge service for our residents as well, using AI, using robots. You know, I think just looking at the simple act of that cleaning robot moving about the facility and the residents and the staff seeing the intelligence of even just a cleaning machine is pretty good, pretty amazing. So those two things probably are the next on our strategic roadmap.
Yeah,
Oh, and speaking out, Luke was talking about software vendors compliance, which is a hot topic in my head and has been for many years, and that nothing can make me more angry than that subject. So I would like to know when we are going to see software vendors having to comply and get a ticket to even sell to us, because they've had the running for way too long.
Yeah, well, as a technology vendor ourselves, as you guys know, quite often the landscape is changing, and the information that vendors need to change their systems, like the current Aged Care Act and standards and stuff like that, often the last to know. Certainly APIs and that sort of thing. It's difficult on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's 13 clinical systems in residential aged care and another 30 in home care. So there's 40 different providers. So that's where sometimes I look at some of these bigger picture department, other digital strategies, like you were saying, Luke, and they say, our idea is to go for interoperability and get everybody to meet the same standard. Is it realistic to think that 43 different independent privately owned system vendors are going to meet the same standards so certainly the first ones to do it will get a competitive advantage, and that's an incentive. But truly building technology, you think buying technology is expensive, building technology is expensive, and so there are constraints, and that's why the data strategy, which is like thinking about moving the data rather than changing the system, is such a great enabler, because it opens up more possibilities that are much more realistic for standardizing information than actually trying to get 40 different vendors to do the same thing all at once. You did pick up slightly on something there, which I wanted to touch on quickly, which was ethics in AI. It's a very important part of AI, and I think that certainly all of the near-term opportunities for AI that we can see in aged care, and we know aged care, we've been in it for 15 years, and we don't know technology, so we think we've got a good point of view here. But all the near-term opportunities are really about that decision support, helping people to make better decisions and do things faster to benefit residents, not taking the person out of the process at all, certainly as far as we can see. So, ethics are pretty well covered, and developing rapidly in the AI space as well. But that's well and truly covered for anybody who's out there concerned about it. Katie, did you have a question that you wanted to ask from the chat?
I did. So we had a great question from Sean, who's popped in our chat. How important is change management for any digital transformation, especially in aged care? And then that's followed up with, what have you seen as the best ways that can be implemented?
Sorry, what was the first one, Katie?
So how important is change management for any digital transformation, especially in aged care?
Luke, do you want to have a crack at that?
Yeah, absolutely. Having been through the pointy end of a few major digital transformation implementations the last few years, I would, put it up there with all the big ticket items of a good architecture and good governance. Change management in an organisation I was at recently, doing probably the largest in-home care system replacement in the country, onto an in-house design system, and that involved quite a large change team, 4 or 5 people working over a couple of years, but built and created how-to guides and best practice newsletters and best practice communication tools that set the organization. It was investment not just in that one project, it was definitely investment in creating an IP baseline for the organization in the future to be able to repeat the best of that, the intranet site that was set up. So I think if we're going to invest big and have a big project, I think it's an awesome thing to actually use some of that energy to actually, make a step change to your change management culture and reuse and build reusable IP from that process. That's probably an answer to both.
I think that's really, really true, Luke. And I think also I'd add, having worked in this space quite a lot myself, a lot of organizations, providers out there will already have adopted some really good change management practices because we've been changing so much for so long.
Yeah.
So you'll find that the way that you communicate and the way that you organize and the way that you plan and the way you consider the end users and stuff like that's probably already ticking a lot of the principles of good change management. So it probably, Luke, is about looking at it through that lens and making sure you fill in any gaps that and build a capability in the organization, because there is more change coming. There are so many problems that need to be solved, like the increasing agency spend. You know, we need the 200 increasing continuously to things like more, 215 minutes. There's constant change. The new standards. There's this constant change process that affects us. And the principles of change management, whether it's tech or process or people or structure, as you were saying, Frank.
But probably just add there, Andrew, that what's tended to happen is the front line have got most of the love from a change management perspective. Think of your AP and AR people; they are front and center of so many of the transactional processes that get impacted. So they always need extra love as well.
Problems, don't they? They flow downstream to accounts. That's exactly true. Well, that's almost all we've got time for. I did want to share a couple of quick things. Here is an example of how Merus can help you get more out of your data for free. So this is a classic example of how you can get your data working for you. None of this costs anything. So a budget forecast report is already all about getting your data on your ANAC classifications and understanding how that's going to change with 215 and potentially with a new price. So if you can't forecast that, or you haven't, or you want some reliable reference, that's a free report that we can give you. Accommodation pricing report. This is a 2-for-1 offer. Know what your pricing in any facility looks like compared to everyone around you. That's a really valuable information, again, using your accommodation pricing data and everybody else's. And the star rating analysis report. Have a look at your star ratings information in more detail. Yes, this is publicly available information, but this is a tailored report for you. And it also compares you to everybody around your area. So again, it's just a nice way of taking your data and putting it in a format that you can use. You can use for board reports or whatever you want to do. Again, 3 free ways or discounted ways that we can actually help you use your own data better. And they're good examples, we think. We want you to know that funding and care minutes and rosters and agency spend continue to be the biggest issues, or one of the biggest operational constraints for the organisation since the change to ANAC. This is another webinar. It's not in this webinar series. It's in a separate webinar series. But again, another free opportunity to get a step-by-step guide where we will tell you how to run an operating model that works. And it's not the only way to do it, but this is one way to do it. Get that information, and again, that's completely free. The next webinar we're doing is really exciting. We're asking the question, is there an objective view of all of of a reasonable amount of the data that's available, an objective view of how we're doing as an industry? So not the outside public criticizing us or reviewing us based on whatever sentiment or whatever piece of data is being thrown around at that moment. But can we objectively, and we're doing this with Stuart Brown, who are another great source of data, can we objectively look at a number of indicators and reach a conclusion about how we think we are doing? You are doing. Do we need to create that for ourselves so that we're publishing information that says this is how we think we're doing? This next webinar will be a preview to that report that will be launching soon after that. So if you're really interested in that and how we can create an objective view of how we're doing, come along to that webinar as well. So I just wanted to say thanks to Frank and Wendy and Justin for giving up your time. I really appreciate that. I think everybody prefers to hear from providers if they can, and also to Luke for coming and sharing those insights. Anybody who wants to know more about that, please reach out to us, of course. That's why we're here. But happy to fill in any gaps, and you will all get this information sent out to you because you registered. But yeah, thanks again Frank, Wendy, and Justin for giving up your time today. And thanks for everybody who gave up their time to come and listen. We hope that was insightful and valuable for you. Have a great rest of the day.